Griffin is a lead pastor in Dallas, Texas. He is the co-author of Family Discipleship with Matt Chandler and a co-host of the Family Discipleship podcast. As a former high school teacher and father of 3 boys, ages 8 through 12, he saw a need for a Bible study on Proverbs to provide wisdom for right thinking and living in a confusing world. It's When Wrong Seems Right, a kid's Bible study on making good choices. Adam, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. So glad to be here.
Now, obviously, this is a very personal book, having 3 boys at this exact age. What were you hoping that they would get out of When Wrong Seems Right when you started putting it together?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's a really good question. A couple things that I really want for my kids. One, I hope a resource like this is going to help them study the Bible for themselves. Obviously, if they're able to study the Bible for themselves at a young age, that's going to serve them so well for the rest of their life. And then secondly, the specific content of this book is going to hopefully prepare them to face choices in a world that's very confused about what's right and wrong, and that God has said that's the way it's going to be. There's going to be a lot of confusion. The proverb that the title of the book comes from says very straightforwardly, there's a way that's going to seem right. Mm-hmm. And in the end, it's going to lead to death. And so what I hope for a resource like this is my kids learn to study the Bible, that also they are able to distinguish and discern what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. Someone once told me you teach people to think first, and then you teach them how to think right. So it's just getting them to learn how to think of these things themselves and then where to turn. Why Proverbs, though? Tell us a bit more about the book of Proverbs.
Sure. Well, initially it was Proverbs because in the series of studies that Moody was doing, they had several New Testament options. And I was like, man, if I'm going to get to write one, I'd love to do an Old Testament book. And then when you think about the age group we're talking about, 8 to 12-year-olds, now Proverbs just spoke to me very clearly in this way, that it sets itself up so well because it's a book written. The concept is a mom and a dad saying, hey, listen to our wisdom. You listen to what we've got to offer you. And God's saying a lot through the Proverbs about what it looks like to be trained, what it looks like to grow in wisdom, and then to pursue a godly life. And that's what I want for our kids. And at the same time, was an opportunity. I think so many studies of the Proverbs end up being, especially for younger kids, kind of moralistic around, hey, it's just a list of do's and don'ts. And while there is a lot of that in the Proverbs that's really helpful, there's also a lot of grace in the Proverbs, a lot of beautiful explanations of what it looks like to forsake sin, to confess sin, and how we will then obtain mercy. And so there was virtues that I thought we could build upon, but also a lot of grace. And so a lot of the book is built on not only the Proverbs, but cross-references to where we see these kind of morals, these virtues, and these vices also relate to New Testament stories of the way Christ interacted with people and what he calls us to in his grace and mercy and justice as well.
I mean, really, as a parent, we're thinking, okay, this is actually a guidebook for us, too, on how we can better instruct our kids, because we're not always doing it right. And my dad, he's one of those guys that just always has so much life experience, and he drops little words of wisdom. I can see that you are that kind of dad, too. But there's a lot of people, I've learned this in my life, there's a lot of people that don't have anyone to speak into their life in that way. So what do you want to tell those young people who've never had a voice of wisdom, but also maybe what do you want to say to those who have made wrong choices in the past?
Excellent. Yeah, there is an idea that, like, it would be great if a family does a book like this together, if they study the Bible together. But really, even this book was written in a way that a kid could do this on their own. And I really believe that one of the things that's happening in our culture is we're kind of dumbing down, or at least lowering our expectations for kids. Now, I want to say to the kid who doesn't have somebody who's maybe discipling them to say, you can pursue God. There's an idea that we wait till later, wait till I grow up, wait till I'm college, wait till I'm done with college. No, pursue God right now. And you will find that the Jesus in the New Testament that says, let these kids come to me, who admires the kingdom aspect of their attitude towards him, that talks about the faith of a child, that you'll find that same Christ is accessible to you in the Word. And then I would say, find a church. If you don't have a family of God in your own home, that's what the family of God in your community exists for. So hopefully there is a great biblical community nearby that I would say, go there, seek out someone to disciple you, but don't be surprised if within a couple of years you're able to disciple others as well.
Yeah, that's good. What are some, maybe 1 or 2 examples in Proverbs of lessons that are applicable to this age group?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite ones, my wife Chelsea does the podcast with me, and she's so brilliant. And she's so much better at this than I am. But one of the Proverbs that we talk about often, there's a proverb that says, can a man hold fire close to his chest and not be burned? Mm-hmm. And while that doesn't have like a real straightforward, clear answer of like, how does that apply in when wrong seems right, we apply it to the proliferation of kind of images you wouldn't want your kids to see online, talking about pornography in an age-appropriate way. Mm-hmm. But the whole concept of that proverb is, can you really be around things that are not good for you and expect to come away unscathed? And there is a sentiment in our culture that says, hey, watching certain things, it's fine. You're listening to certain music, it's okay. It's not going to have a huge impact. But God would say, can you really hold fire close to your chest and not get burned? And that proverb is so good for what I want with my kids when I'm talking about morality. I'm not just saying like, hey, an arbitrary rule. Here's a rule, don't do this. And here's a rule, do this. But literally the Lord is saying, the reason I'm warning you against things is because it is not good for you. You can't hold fire against your chest and expect not to be burned. And then I think if you're asking for multiple ones, another one I love is about self-control. There's a proverb that says, a man without self-control is like a city without walls. We'd like to think that in following God, what true freedom would look like is getting to do whatever we want. And that's not true freedom. According to the Bible, if you had no walls, if you had no restrictions, if you had nothing, it really would look like there's nothing then to protect you. We think freedom looks like no limits, but really what it looks like is limits that protect us. Like in my household, I don't know what it's like where you live. I lock my doors at night. I lock my doors at night, not because I'm trying to imprison my children, but because I'm trying to protect them. These locks don't exist. They exist to restrict things and limit things, but in order to create freedom, that my kids might play in their home and sleep in their home without fear. And self-control is similar. It's a fruit of the Spirit that says, hey, we're going to put some limits here. And these limits are for your freedom. These limits are for your good. And I love that. There's so many. I mean, I could go all day. Obviously, there's 40 of them in this book, in this kids' Bible study, that I think the Proverbs is rich with opportunities to teach our kids and disciple them.
Absolutely. So many good nuggets. So much to memorize too in there. So good. There's a section too on recognizing your own sin. And you even said, sin thrives in our blind spots. Yeah. What's a common sin that young people have a hard time detecting in themselves or in others? Maybe this could be the last example.
Yeah, I think, I talk in the book, I think the first one in that section is about our sense of sin, that there's people that think they're clean, but really they're in filth. And that is about recognizing sin in yourself and recognizing sin in other people. And I think one of the ones that the Bible actually talks about a lot, but churches don't discuss very often, is gossip, is the propensity to talk about other people and in a derogatory sense. And the Bible warns us about how just dangerous that kind of slander is, that kind of judgment is. And certainly it's something that kids excuse a lot. We will look at celebrities or we'll look at family members, and we will, when they're not around, we'll talk about them in ways that are derogatory. And these people bear the image of God, and God has warned us against that. But it is in many ways an excusable sin, a rationalized sin, especially for kids. We might even think it's adorable that kids have opinions like that. And so we might even encourage them to talk about other people, when really what we're doing is fostering a sense of when someone's not around, it's okay to gossip. And the Bible warns against that. Again, can you hold a flame against your chest and not get burned? It may seem victimless. It's not. Mm-hmm.
And it's not excusable to say it's a blind spot, especially with a resource like this and people speaking into your life. So I appreciate that this book it's a study. It's not just a devotional with a Bible passage and a takeaway. There's questions, there's thoughts, there's that cross-reference you mentioned to the New Testament. So it really is teaching young people how to study the Bible. So any last thoughts as we wrap up here, Adam?
No, I think what I'd love to just encourage, there's a lot of resources for little kids. There's a ton of kids books and kids Bible kids Bibles and kids records, albums. And there's a lot of resources for teenagers, really. And there's tons of resources for adults and parents. What Moody's trying to touch on here, which I love and I'm so excited to be a part of, is this age group, 8 to 12 years old, there's not a lot. And the thing is, this is when we're trying to help our kids turn the corner from just depend on mom and dad to lead you to develop your own muscles when it comes to studying the Word of God. So I hope families pick this up. I hope they do it together to an extent, but I also hope there's a ton of 8 to 12-year-olds who are learning to study God's Word for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, God prepared you to be the right person for this one. So I appreciate your time and just sharing. Again, Adam Griffin, it's called When Wrong Seems Right, a kid's Bible study on making good choices. Adam, thanks.
Thank you for having me.